Good evening and welcome to the Mayor and Council meeting of April 14th. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to ask that we also have a moment of silence for the 2,805 New Jersey residents who have been lost so far to this pandemic. Thank you. Erica, you need to unmute.
I wish to announce that the 48-hour notice as required under the Open Public Meetings Act was emailed to the Asbury Park Press, the Coast Star, and the Coaster on January the 9th of 2020, placed on the bulletin board in the borough office, and that a copy has been filed with the borough clerk. Mr. Bunnell?
Nope.
Mr. Gubitosi? Mr. Sexsmith?
Well, you got Alan, correct? He's there.
Okay.
Unmute, Alan.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Gubitosi?
Here.
Great. Mr. Sexsmith?
Here.
Mr. Weber?
Here.
Mayor Engelstadt?
Here. Can I ask if either Lindsay DeLuca or Ronnie Cahill are on the call?
I'm here. Lindsay's here.
Lindsay, we wanted to take this time to single out you and Ronnie in absence. Tell us about your story, please.
Right now I'm at Jersey Shore. I'm a registered nurse. I work in the medical ICU. And we're just, I mean, it's a trying time, but we're doing everything that we can, and everybody's working together to, you know, try and make things better.
So I want to thank Council President Weber for suggestion that we take some time out of our meeting to honor the two of you who are representing thousands of people who are not only saving lives, but putting your own lives at risk. And we can't thank you enough for taking a few minutes out of what we can't imagine must be incredibly trying times. I ask the Council President Weber if he'd like to add a few words as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lindsay, thank you for being on. And again, just as a nurse at Jersey Shore, just want to thank you for everything that you're doing. As long as we're going to do these Zoom meetings, I thought maybe we should pick a different healthcare facility and pick a few health professionals at each of our next meetings and just honor them and thank them. So thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate that. And we'll be doing this hopefully into the future. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Thank you. You too.
So this is obviously a different format. When we have the opportunities for public comment, David Brown, our borough administrator, will unmute all of our guests, and at that time we'll do our best effort to make your public comment. We would ask that you give your name and your address, and if for any reason you can't get through, I'm going to just put up, this is probably backwards, isn't it? Yeah, so this is my cell number. It's 732-236-9884. You can resort to that if you can't get through during either the public comment or the public comment at the end.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, it was not backwards. So if you want to show
Okay.
that again, it
All
actually
right, I'll
works.
show that again. So this is just a last resort. If you can't get through to my cell phone is right next to me. I'll put you on speaker, but this is only if we can't for some reason get through during the Zoom meeting, you can call through on this number. Okay.
But also call that if your garbage doesn't get picked up too.
Paybacks. Greg, are you ready for the bid opening for the Second Avenue concession? You have to, okay,
Yes, sir.
all right. I guess I can preface that. Was a bid received?
Yes, there was a bid
Okay.
received for the Second Avenue concession. Forgive me, I would ask David to jump in and give the details of the bid. But I think he has the actual paperwork. Is that the case, David?
The bid that we're talking about right now, there was no bid received according to Erica.
Forgive me, then I have it confused with, I believe, Newark Avenue, where we received one bid.
Yes, and that's the one on for
And
the
we did not
agenda.
receive any bids for Second Avenue. Forgive me.
Okay, so in light of the fact that we have this is the second time we are bidding out the Second Avenue concession. Greg or David, could you map out what we can do it from this point on?
Sure. So under the local public contracts law, if the borough advertises two bids on the same terms and does not receive satisfactory bids, or in this case, any bids, which are clearly not satisfactory, then the borough may negotiate directly with vendors in order to award that contract in the absence of in the presence of two failed prior bids on the exact same terms.
Now's the time for the approval of the minutes from the March 24th regular meeting. Make a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bennell? Absent. Mr. Gubatose?
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad?
Yes. David, do you want to walk us through the final hearing and adoption of bond ordinance 2020-3? I know we have some questions and comments, but before we get to that, could you walk us through what this is all about?
Okay, Mayor. Bond ordinance 2023, this is the ordinance for improvements to the north end of the boardwalk. By this means, we're appropriating 490,000. Of that, 310 are in bonds or notes, and 180,000 of it is in the Monmouth County Open Space Program.
Now, there's been some questions with regards to the fact that in light of the financial situation that we may be in down the road, and maybe there's a desire on the part of council members for additional information or understanding of what we can and cannot do, because this is tied into a grant. Do we know at this time if there's a risk to delay this to the next council meeting while additional information is gathered?
Mayor, after speaking to our engineer, Jerry Frieda, he believes that we should move forward with this item, as well as speaking to the CFO, would like to move forward with this item, and myself. Based on Mr. Frieda's analysis, which he emailed to us late today. Basically, these are generally cost estimates that he has put in for contingencies for items as you remove the boardwalk. It's unknown until we get to that point. Just because we have X amount of dollars to spend on this project does not mean that the engineering costs will cost that much, or we will spend that much.
So let me make a motion to open the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bennell? Absent. Mr. Gubatose?
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad?
Yes, so now we'll start with members of council who might have questions, and then we'll open up to the general public.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thanks so much. I expected Councilman Bonnell to be on this call. Apparently he's not. He is the one that had some questions about this. And, speaking for the council, we all saw the CFO, a PowerPoint that was provided by the CFO, given by others advising towns on their doing their budgets, and they said capital improvements might be one thing that you want to look at again. My big question, I'll ask it now. But I definitely want to hear from the public and everybody. But again, is there any? If we delay this for 2 weeks, do we jeopardize anything? And if the answer to that is we don't jeopardize anything, then I would be in favor of hearing what people have to say, but also tabling it and waiting 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, the other question is, and I have no problem with that offhand. I just need some guidance either from the CFO or from David or even the attorney, what risks are involved with any decision to not go forward because there is grant money tied into this.
Okay, and I see Councilman Bonnell is here now, so just wanted to add that if the record can reflect that Councilman Bonnell is now on. Thanks.
It's Sandy, the CFO. May I comment, Mayor?
Sure.
I just wanted to say that by adopting this ordinance, if council chooses to do so, by no means means that you necessarily have to move forward. The bond ordinance will give the authority to borrow money should the need arise. The adoption of the bond ordinance doesn't necessarily authorize the spending of $490,000. It is just the authority to borrow money.
Sandy, is the 180,000 open space grant, is that tied into a formula based upon what our anticipated contribution is?
Yes, I believe that there's a 100% cash match, so the borough will have to spend at least $180,000 on this project.
And it's my understanding from Mr. Frieda that because this is a bidded process, in all likelihood, this is a not to exceed amount. In all likelihood, in a bidded process, the actual dollar amounts may be substantially lower. Is that possible?
That is correct. That's what I understand from Mr. Frieda as well. The $490,000 is based on a worst case scenario estimate. If they get in there and dig up the boardwalk and realize that more structure has to be replaced, then the money's already kind of authorized. And that's why the cost estimate is so high. In speaking with Mr. Frieda today, he indicated that, there's a possibility it could come in less.
So just to getting back to Councilmember Weber's comments with regards to the guidance that you've been receiving, how do you balance that? How do you balance the need to go easy on capital expenditures at the same time advocating for proceeding on this?
Well, that is, and I wanted to make that clear that, I wasn't necessarily advocating to proceed. I was just kind of wanting to give as much of the facts that I could, but I think your point is very valid, Mayor, that, at this time with some of the budget constraints that will be placed on the borough because of COVID-19, those things definitely do need to be taken into consideration. But I just wanted to reiterate that by approving this ordinance does not necessarily mean that you have to plow forward with it. You can adopt this ordinance and it could sit for 2 weeks or it could sit for a month. It doesn't mean that you have to necessarily, move forward quickly.
Is there a finite amount of time that you can sit on it?
So I think Jerry Frieda, I believe he's on the call, may be able to answer that a little bit better because I'm not completely familiar yet with the Monmouth County Open Space Grants. I know with the DOT grants, there is a set time period, and maybe Jerry could weigh in on the time period for the Monmouth County grants.
Jerry, are you on the call?
He's muted, but I see him.
So generally speaking, with grants of this type, there is a certain amount of time, something like 18 months or so from the time of award. I don't know the specifics, but it's generally in that realm, where, you know, from the time of award, you have to award a contract within, some grants are a year, some grants are 18 months, you know, but there is specific time constraints to that. And that's the only consideration, you know, that because if you were to not proceed forward, if we've already got the grant award, and if you were not to proceed, then if we were to try to apply for the next round of Monmouth County open space grants, we may not be considered because we didn't act on the grant that we were already given.
I can help you add to that. So there, can't tell you the specific time frame as we sit here. The DOT grants are typically 2 years. The step with actually moving forward with the project is awarding the contract. You have to award the contract under a certain time period under the grant. If you return these grants, then you're not eligible for open space grants for a period, I believe, of 3 years. And so it authorizes money available that would allow Sandy to execute a certification of availability of funds that would allow you to later award the contract to a contractor who would actually do the work. So the step in actually moving forward is the award of the contract, and that is typically the trigger under the grant requirements to comply with their timeframes in order to use the grant. I'll defer to Jerry on what the exact timeframe is on this grant and when it was awarded, so the governing body has an idea of the timeframes.
Is anyone aware of any special allowances that the county is putting in place in light of the situation we're in?
I have not heard of anything.
Mr. Mayor, I can see Jerry Frieda is on the line, but his phone is muted. I think he's trying to figure out how to unmute.
Well,
And Councilman Bonnell, as you probably have figured out, we're talking about the the boardwalk, and we were wondering if you could add your commentary, concerns.
Can you guys hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Okay. I did
Oh,
quite,
and we can see you now too.
I did quite a bit of legwork this week. Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong. You said that the $310,000 of burden for the town will come out of the beach fund.
This is a beach ordinance, that's correct.
Okay, so the first thing that's kind of alarming to me is we don't know what's going to happen with the beach or the revenue that we're getting from the beach. And we are sitting on top of approving $310,000, which in worst case scenario, the beach is going to be closed and we're not going to make any money. That's a huge concern. The second concern for me is that I've had several conversations with the DPW, and contrary to some opinions, Biagio is very confident that they can perform this work. The third item is I did a little legwork yesterday regarding the Ocean Grove Boardwalk repair. They're doing a project which is similar in nature to ours. The Camp Meeting Association's budget is $500,000, same as ours. They're doing 30% more in length, and the boardwalk itself is twice as wide in most places. So the $500,000 price tag on our repair doesn't measure up. I would propose that we send a couple of guys from the DPW down to the boardwalk in the next 10 days and have them take off 20 feet of the boardwalk so we can see what we're actually dealing with. The boardwalk is closed. The timing couldn't be better. And in conversation with Jerry Frieda, the allowance
Randy, we lost you. Lost your audio.
Okay, well,
You're back. You're back.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
If you can see me, the cost estimate that we
All right. Speaking for myself, I've lost you again, Randy.
Same here, Randy. After cost estimate, sorry about that.
Well,
Mr. Frida, are you on the call?
I can see him. He is, but
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
muted.
Jerry's muted. He's on his iPhone, so I don't know how to do that, how to tell him to do it anyway. I do want to add that in conversations with Randy, he was exploring the idea that maybe instead of redoing the boardwalk and all the supports and the structure underneath, he thought maybe we could get away with just redoing the surface, which is obviously a much less expensive job. And that's what he was referring to when he said our DPW staff could do it. So that's just to add to what Randy was thinking before. So if that changes anything.
I mean, one of my concerns is that we're not, this is like step 5 of an 8-step process. We've voted on this previously unanimously. We have recommendations from the 3 professionals that are most closely involved with this, the borough engineer, the CFO, and the borough administrator, all who support going forward with this. I love our DPW as much as the next person, but this is the same DPW that is now asking us for more help because they need it. And
this is something that's going to happen in the fall.
one of the
It's not going to happen now.
One of the advantages to having a private contractor is you have a set deadline to finish a project.
Can you guys hear me now?
I don't know where our DPW is going to be.
Can I weigh in? Can I continue to weigh in here? Because I got cut off.
And Jerry's online too, somewhere.
Am I on now?
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Jerry.
good.
Go ahead, Jerry.
No, well, I know Randy was in the middle, so he should finish.
Okay. Well, Gary, in answer to your comment just now, this isn't planned until next fall. We have a lot of time to weave this into the DPW schedule. So we can certainly make it a finite schedule. We absolutely should. We made concessions to have them do the bocce courts, the lifeguard station, and this project actually is far less complicated. So I don't see any complications whatsoever. I've talked to Biagio more than once. He is on board 100%.
Jerry?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's fine. At the time when this was discussed, and recognize this was all done back in the summer of 2018. So it was quite a while ago. And DPW at that time just, they had the fountain going on and some other things, and they just couldn't commit to it. If DPW feels that they have the manpower to do it, that's great. We would just have to go back to the grant and tell them we don't need as much of the grant as they offered. They will pay 50% of the cost of the project, and we match the rest. So if it turns out to be 100,000, they'll pay 50,000.
Hey, Jerry.
If it's 400,000, they'll pay 200,000. No, they won't. They'll pay only up to the 180 that we're allowed.
Hey, Jerry.
Yeah.
Um, that's another reason that I think it's really important. I think I got cut off when I was saying this before. If we have time, and I talked to Biagio again about this today, to send some guys down there to take up some of the boardwalk so we can see what we're actually dealing with, because it may be more than 490.
Well,
don't
yeah,
know
depending
that.
on how bad the structure is, yes.
Right. So before we make any moves, we say Thursday, we send 3 guys down there. The boardwalk is closed. There's not a whole lot going on. And have DPW spend a half a day and take up some of the boardwalk so we
No.
can see what's going on underneath.
That's fine, but what they need to do is they need to have new material on hand, because when they start taking up that old timber material, it's going to splinter and break and everything else. So they're going to have, they're not going to be able to put it back down what they're taking up, is what I'm saying.
And I agree with you, but the point is the boardwalk is closed. So we can fence it off. We can put barricades up. We can get stuff back down to make it walkable.
Sure. I mean, listen, that would certainly be beneficial. But again, then we run the risk of opening a small hole here, but what happens with the rest of the boardwalk? You know, you just don't really know until all the decking comes up.
No, but we can get a much better idea.
You would, yes, you would. And the
So-
other thing too is measuring the stringers, because the composite material we want to use for the decking is much more expensive than the timber, and it flexes more, but it lasts almost forever. So you don't have the maintenance issues. So you may have to put stringers between stringers to take the deflection out. So that's something else we have to look at.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so that would be fine. My whole mode was to get the funding going, working with the CFO. But yeah, this work would not start until after the beach season anyway. So we have some time to do some investigative work if DPW can get down there.
And Jerry, this is Al Gubitozzi. What does that do to your time frame if we are to delay a vote on this or delay the process for 2 weeks to a month? What does that do to your time frame for being able to issue an RFP?
2 weeks won't be a problem at all. A month could cause us to be a little late getting the bids out, but we can still rush through it and try. Anything more than a month would be a problem with the timing.
Jerry, it's Gary. How is the work that's being proposed by DPW to take a look at it different from what anything you may have done to prepare an estimate?
The difference is they would rip the decking off so we could see the substructure below. When I did the estimate, I assumed that, 20% of the substructure was going to need upgrades.
When you
It
say
actually
20
looks to be in really good shape for its life.
Jerry,
From the parts we could see.
when you say 20%, Jerry, what exactly are you considering in that 20%?
I'm considering that, there may be a pile that needs to be replaced. There could be stringers, pile caps, heavy timber work that needs to be done to support the decking.
You think there's pile caps under there?
Yeah, there should be.
If there's no pile clusters, how would there be pile caps?
Well, we don't know that there's, when the boardwalks are built, they're usually built X amount of feet apart in a row, the piles. So there could be anywhere from 2 to 3 piles in the middle of that boardwalk span.
Aren't the
And if there
piles,
isn't, we might have to add them
aren't the
because we're going to
girders,
need to build that to support the composite material deck.
the girders that are exposed are through bolted through the pile tips?
Okay. Well, that to me, I call that girder pile combination of pile cap.
Okay. So
Yeah.
there's no concrete, is what I'm saying.
No. There's no
not a
concrete at all. It's all timber.
There's no traditional pile caps.
No. There's not a concrete. No, there's not.
Okay,
Jerry?
So I'm fine if you guys want to hold it off, but recognize that the total funding that we went after was for the worst case scenario. And to get what we could as far as getting the most money in a grant. And that was the approach that we took way back when, which was 2 years ago.
Hey, Jerry, it's
Yes.
Greg Cannon, the Borough Attorney. Could you,
Yes.
for mine and the Administrator David's benefit, could you give us the timeline of the grant and what the deadline is for award so we can calendar that and be on top of it?
The timeline of the grant. They
Well,
usually
we
give you
have to
2
award the
years
contract. That's really
to
what we
award
need.
a contract. That's the key. Then you're not in jeopardy of losing the funding that you received. But what happens is they will not let you reapply to the program for another project until this one's complete. So we have plenty of time to award a contract and not lose the funding. But remember, if we miss the September building season, now we're going to slip into the spring building season because summer we can't do this work. So the fear is if we go into the spring, we're going to lose another 6 months. Okay, we still won't lose the grant, but we're leaving ourselves in a predicament where we could run out of time and we won't be able to apply for future projects.
So let's run this scenario through that the DPW takes a look in conjunction with you. You come up with a number that says, here's what it would cost to do this in-house. We then go back to the county and ask for a revised a grant amount?
No, I think what we end up doing is we have to figure out what it is. Let's say the revisions for material and whatever come out to be, and I'm just picking a number, $100,000. Then the county would pay for 50% of it and we'd pay for the rest and we do the work. And then whatever money we don't use, we give back.
So it's 50% with a cap of 180?
What's that?
It's 50% with a cap of 180.
Well, yes, their
Because
contribution.
what we would have voted on tonight.
200,000, they're going to pay 100. If it comes
Okay,
out to
but what-
400,000, which it won't, they will only pay 180. They won't pay 200,000.
Okay, that was my question. So
Yes.
I unless somebody else wants to, I'll make a motion that we table this until the next council meeting to give time for the DPW to work with the borough engineer to get a reassessment if this can be done in-house. I also need some sort of a confirmation from either the CFO in discussions with the county to ensure that if we come back with a revised amount, that they also would have a revised amount, and also some guidance from the county with regards to the COVID-19 situation, if there is an expanded window for these things to take place. Is that enough guidance?
Yes,
Mr. Mayor.
and this is Jerry again. I do have a call into the county to find out if we can go about having them pay material only, and if there's any issue with that on their part. I haven't gotten an answer yet.
So before we take a vote on that, any public comment on this? I see, Mr. Cohen, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, Thomas J. Cohen, 612 3rd Avenue. Mayor, this has been a very healthy conversation, and I enjoy these conversations. Everyone brought something to the table here. My recommendation would be slightly different. I believe you should pass this tonight and save the 2 weeks as more information is gathered. We need the best utilization of this grant, and more information will help. I mean, Public Works can still go do this preliminary work, but I'd like to remind you, when the bids went out for the town the town fountain, you openly criticized the high number of the bids from contractors, and Public Works did end up doing the work. So I think that having Public Works take a shot at it is a very reasonable thing. And I think we can all get in a room again with more information and determine the best way to make this grant work. So I would advise going ahead with it tonight.
Thank you.
May I just add something to that comment,
Yes, I
please?
just need your name and address, please.
I'm sorry. It's Sandy Rice, CFO.
Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to kind of dovetail on Mr. Cohen's comment that by passing this ordinance does not mean that you're tied into anything. This just kind of gets the ball in place. You can take all the time you want to then do your, study, rip some of the boardwalk up or whatever. They're two independent things. Just having the bond ordinance in place is kind of the first step.
Sandy, my only question is that this ordinance has actual dollar amounts attached to it. If those
Correct.
dollar amounts change, we're still okay?
Correct, right. So we are authorized up to $490,000. Now, if the project, worst case scenario, they find out that things are worse than they thought, then you would have to amend the bond ordinance for more money. But, it doesn't sound like that may be the case. And as long as we don't spend more than the 490, we're okay. And what happens with the bond ordinance is that money that's not spent or not appropriated just gets canceled. It's a simple resolution at the end that to just cancel the remaining balance. So you're not necessarily tied into this forever.
What about the county dollar amount?
So that, Jerry Frieda spoke about that. If we find out we don't need as much, we may not need as much grant money, which means we wouldn't need as much of a cash match to that grant either.
But we don't burn any bridges with the county if we come back to them with a lower amount.
Right.
I've got a question for the CFO, if I may. What's the borough's exposure if we have a worst case scenario beach season this summer and we've approved this bond ordinance?
So that's kind of what I'm trying to say. So, say we're into this, we adopt this bond ordinance tonight, and then a month from now, we're going to have a horrible beach season. We really can't afford to go with this project. We simply cancel this ordinance by resolution. And that's basically, that's all that needs to be done. You're not, just by adopting this does not mean you're necessarily tied to anything. It's when you would get to the point of issuing debt for this bond ordinance that you could get, it would be a little bit harder then, but we're not at that point. We're not even at the point where we're talking about issuing bonds or notes for this project.
So we've got basically until the point of awarding contracts to decide how we want to move forward.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
And this is Al Gubitozzi. Sandy, what is it we lose? What is your concern about delaying this vote 2 weeks?
My concern is losing the grant. Jerry Frieda kind of said that he reached out. I will reach out to county. I was actually just kind of Googling some documentation as the rest of you were talking. I know that with grants like these, DOT grants, the Monmouth County grants, there is time constraints. And if you don't award the contract within a certain period of time, you jeopardize not being able to go for future rounds of funding that might be available through Monmouth County. That's my only concern with it.
So, in a sense, we can have our cake and eat it too. If we get a sense from DPW and the borough engineer that we can do it in-house and we can do it cheaper, and then we go to the county and say, hey, we don't need 180, we need 100, then everything's cool, right?
Right.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could give you an analogy, if you got a mortgage commitment to buy a house and then you didn't buy the house, you wouldn't have spent the money. This is like the mortgage commitment for the project. You're applying for the loan, essentially, for the bond, and then you either spend it or you don't when it comes to fruition. And the award of the contract is the trigger for the satisfying the grant, spending the money, and committing to spend the money that's being effectively applied for But since you're a public entity, you can issue your own debt versus going to another lender. If I could give that analogy to kind of frame the situation.
So, Mr. Cannon, two quick questions. One is, the wording of the ordinance says authorizing the issuance of 310,000 of bonds. Two questions. One, someone else I thought earlier told me we would at least approve bonding of up to the full amount of the project, the 490s. Is that not correct? It's only the 310. And then secondly, the 310, are we approving the actual issuance of a bond? There would be a bond sale for 310,000?
No, not at all. Not at all. The bond ordinance only authorizes you to issue debt up to that amount. It's an authorization to issue debt. It doesn't mean that you will issue debt.
And the debt, the extent of the debt is 310,000. So you have a total project cost of 490. You're getting 180 back from the county. So in terms of so you're only looking at I don't say only, but you're looking at 310 in terms of what you're authorizing the issuance of bonds for. Now, I'll jump in before Sandy does. You have to authorize 490 because it's a spend and return grant. So you have to spend the entire, you put out the debt, the 490, and then the county gives you the money back and you use that to repay the debt, if that makes sense. So you're authorizing 490,000, but you're getting the money, the 180 back. And that's why it says 490, 310. It's an explanation of the deduction of the grant amount. But you have to spend that money in order to get it back. So in the first instance, you're going to spend that money, and then we apply very quickly because you don't want to carry the interest cost to get that money back from the county. That's the difference in the figures.
And that was why, I'm sorry, that was the reason I asked the question. In order to spend that money, where does that money come from? If the bond issuance is for 310 and we don't yet have the 180 grant funding, is that coming out of surplus? Where's that coming if we're not bonding for it?
Coming from the proceeds of the bond sale.
Not if we don't issue the bonds. I'm sorry to jump in, Greg.
Yeah, go ahead, Sandy. This is your department, so please.
Okay. So what happens is that Mr. Gubitosi is correct. The current fund, or the grant fund, if you will, kind of acts for the float, acts as the float for the grant. So it is a reimbursement grant. We would have to put the money out first and then get reimbursed by the, by the county for the grant. And yes, in essence, the money would come from surplus if we do not issue bonds or notes for this.
And I believe, Jerry Frieda, if you are still on the line, are you still there? Mr.
Yes,
Frieda?
I am.
I think in a conversation you and I had, at least you had suggested one alternative would have been to issue bonds for the full amount, the 490. Did I misunderstand that? Or is that an
No,
option?
but that is an option to bond for the entire amount and then use the grant, just in case something does happen to the grant, you don't have the money, you still have the entire amount to complete the work.
I think that's what I recalled you mentioning earlier. That was why I was asking the question.
Sandy, I have a question. If we do this in-house, then we are looking for current year dollars to cover labor and materials. Do we even have those dollars? I mean, there's the one advantage to bonding is that the cost is spread out over a number of years. This would have to be absorbed in the current beach budget, wouldn't it?
It would. And, I know, Mayor, we kind of had a meeting on a Saturday morning regarding the budget, regarding COVID-19, all of the concerns that have been brought to light about beach towns and the type of season that we may see. In that respect, if we were talking a different year and a different time, I would agree with Mr. Frieda and say, you know what, let's just issue the bonds and notes right off the bat and go from there. Not this year. I will not make that recommendation because of, what we understand may be a very poor beach season. So I would not advocate to do that. And that's kind of why I've been trying to make the point by passing this bond ordinance does not necessarily mean that you have to issue the debt for the 490,000. It's just the authorization should we need to issue the debt.
So Sandy, this is Al Gubitosi. Should we be discussing, I'm gonna take this to the other extreme. Should we be discussing a bond issue of 490,000? To the
Not
mayor,
in my opinion.
Well,
Not
to
in
the
my
mayor-
opinion.
not in your opinion, but if we had a horrible beach season and if we had to fund this amount out of our surplus, is that not a potentially dangerous practice for us, given that we just have this huge unknown tied to COVID-19? Would we not be better served to have debt that we could pay down over 20 years rather than take 300,000, give or take, out of our surplus? Or 200,000, whatever the math.
Yes. I know I sound contradictory here in my statements, but there really is just so much unknown about what our beach season is going to look like. My recommendation is that if you want to, you can adopt this bond ordinance and then take a step back, maybe like Mr. Bunnell said, do some legwork to see what it's actually going to entail, and then maybe reevaluate the situation in a couple of weeks.
So this is John Weber. Appreciate the discussion of everybody. But before some of this discussion, the mayor did make a motion to table this. And if
Yeah,
that, I was,
let me first say that I can table that. I can make a motion I can pull it if the consensus is to follow the guidance of the CFO at this point.
well, no, I was going to second your motion, Mr. Mayor, because hearing all this discussion, I still don't see any downside to waiting 2 weeks. That's a deal breaker. So I think it helps us to wait those 2 weeks. In 2 weeks' time, if everything that the CFO said, I agree with a lot she said. But and one other point, in 2 weeks we may know a lot more about what direction the state's heading, what's our summer going to look like. We may know a lot more in 2 weeks.
Okay, so my motion to table has been made and seconded. Erica?
Erica, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Mr. Bunnell?
We lost him.
Mr. Gubitosi?
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mayor
Yes.
Engelstad?
Yes. Okay.
Mr. Bunnell, did you come back?
I've texted him by phone and he's not responding to that either. So we've lost
Okay.
Mr. Bunnell.
So I'm going to move on to the next item, which is the final hearing adoption of ordinance number 2020-07, an ordinance to exceed the municipal budget appropriation limits and to establish a cap bank for calendar year 2020. Sandy, just quickly walk us through why we have to do this.
So if the need should arise for us to exceed the budget appropriation limits, we have the ordinance in place. I am not intending to exceed those limits. A cap ordinance like this is something that is generally adopted every year by municipalities, kind of just in case. And that's why I had, asked for it to be introduced at the last meeting. This is merely the adoption of that ordinance. It is kind of like worst case scenario. If you need to exceed those limits, the ordinance is in place for you to do that. As I said in my budget work that I've done so far, I we will not need to exceed those limits.
So I'll make a motion to open the hearing. Is there a second?
Second,
Mr. Brunel? Mr. Gubatose?
yes,
Mr. Gubatose?
yes,
Mr. Sexsmith?
Yes,
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad?
Yes, now's the time for any public comment with regards to ordinance 2020-07. Mr. Cohen.
Thomas J. Cohen, 612 Third Avenue. Mayor, I want to be consistent. Every previous year, I've asked you not to do this and really try to stay at the 2.5% cap. This is the year where this is something that is necessary based on the COVID-19. Also, I'm concerned if we're going to change up the way we've run things before by using substantial amounts of our surplus in order to keep taxes level, which is something I don't agree with. I think the surpluses are for the rainy day, which is now today. So I'm hoping we're not going to use any surplus, but if we have to jump the cap, then this would be the year to do it, and I believe we should have the right to do that. So I would like to see this approved.
Thank you. Any other public comment with regards to this ordinance? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to close the hearing and adopt ordinance 2020-07. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Brunel? Mr. Gubatose?
yes,
Mr. Sexsmith?
yes,
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad?
Yes. The consent agenda includes the following items.
yeah,
Item A is-
excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, did we skip the public comment for agenda items?
My apologies. This is a different world we're in. So yes, you're absolutely correct, and I'll do that now. So now is the time for public comment on any agenda items. You'll also have the opportunity to make a comment at the end of the meeting of any item or anything you'd like to bring up. My apologies. Mr. Cohen.
Mayor, Thomas Cohen, 612 Third Avenue. I just had one question about the bills list, item 50890. There's an appropriation for $14,950 to Oak Tree Sheds for beach lockers. And I was wondering how many lockers were purchased with that? And will they be new lockers for new people, or will they be replacing disrepaired lockers?
Ms. Brown, do you know the answer to that?
No, I don't have the answer to that right now, but I can get back to Mr.
Usually
Cohen.
that is for new lockers or replacement lockers.
Mr. Mayor, I believe I know the answer to that. We should still confirm with Michelle, but about a month ago, when we went through some of the budget work for the beach, both the lockers and the badges, Michelle indicated to me that we were going to spend about 15,000. It was going to be covering, it was going to be new lockers that would be adding to revenue, that would be sold in addition to the current outstanding lockers. And the average cost was $500 per locker. So whatever that math is, those would be added to our current total.
So they would be revenue generators then?
Well, only because we have a very lengthy standing list right now. So the assumption was some people would give up their lockers, but many more would come to replace the ones that were given up as well as purchase these new ones. That was the understanding about a month ago. Probably 2 months ago, was prior to COVID-19.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor. That's all I have.
Any other public comment on agenda items? Just go ahead and speak. Hi, Paul, go ahead.
Paul Champion, 411 and a half Lorraine. I wanted to.
Paul, if you could speak a little closer, please.
Okay, sure. Is that better?
Yes.
I'd like to offer congratulations to the borough for closing on the purchase of the First Methodist Church. I want to thank the mayor and the past and present members of the Borough Council and all the other Bradley Beach residents who have made this possible. It's a good job. Now comes the real work, to turn the church into a vibrant community center while retaining the beautiful interiors and exterior of this historic church. It will take money and careful planning. I have created a new not-for-profit corporation, the Friends of the Bradley Beach Community Center, and have applied for 501c3 IRS status. We are adding interested trustees to this group and hope to secure grants and additional financial support for the renovation project ahead. I have started reaching out to architects, preservationists, and engineers, but have waited to see how the borough wishes to proceed. I am glad to see that the mayor has proposed that a task force committee be appointed specifically for this purpose. I strongly urge the council to support this by having representatives from the borough, some with needed expertise and some representing the groups that will be considered for space in the community center. We can start the plans and ensure that the borough both creates a vibrant community center and preserves a valuable historic building. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any other public comment with regards to agenda items? Okay. The consent agenda includes the following items. Item A is the aforementioned bill list. Item B, authorizing a gazebo rental refund of $750 to Carrie Friedman. Item C, authorize a tax payment refund in the amount of $3,214.38 to CoreLogic for overpayment on first quarter taxes for property at 314 Fifth Avenue, Block 49, Lot 21. Item D is approving the letter of endorsement for the Maritime Forest Phase 3 application to the ANJAC Open Space Grant. Item E, authorize the award of an emergency procurement of a silent messenger board with trailer for the coronavirus response. Item F, authorize the award of a lease for the food truck concession at Newark Avenue, Beachfront Promenade to Josephine Ferrara LLC for the 2020 summer season. Item G, authorizing for emergency temporary appropriations for the period between the beginning of the current fiscal year and the date of the adoption of the budget for said year. Item H is the authorizing a resolution urging the state of New Jersey to hold fossil fuel companies accountable for damages and mitigation costs due to climate change and sea level rise. And item I is what Paul was referring to, the appointment of a community center task force committee. Before we break any of these out, I'm going to ask Councilmember Gubitosi to, if he would mind reading the letter of endorsement for the Maritime Forest.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for extending that honor to me. However, I don't have that letter in front of me.
Okay.
Is that something you might be able to read for us?
Maybe.
Said back at you.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Mayor, I can do that for you. I have it right in front of me. The resolution.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is a resolution in support of 2020 Association of New Jersey Environmental Commission's grant application endorsing Phase 3 of the Bradley Beach Maritime Forest. Whereas the Bradley Beach Maritime Forest was created in 2013 in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy as a demonstration of the resiliency of vegetation to storms and the potential to use that resiliency to further protect the borough of Bradley Beach from future storms, as well as to improve the ecology and biology of the borough of Bradley Beach. And whereas since its creation, the Bradley Beach Maritime Forest has been recognized nationally and received numerous awards. And whereas the borough of Bradley Beach and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service executed a partners agreement in 2018 that agrees to maintain restoration efforts for at least 10 years in consideration for in-kind services, plants, and equipment. And whereas the partnership between the borough of Bradley Beach and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service implemented Phase 2 of the Bradley Beach Maritime Forest, which included crushed shells on the access road, a split rail fence, and interpretive signs. And whereas Phase 3 of the Bradley Beach Maritime Forest will continue restoration efforts by adding more shells to the access road, plants in the truck washdown area, create 2 new walking paths, and add benches to provide public access to the ecology and biology being fostered and nurtured by the Bradley Beach Maritime Forest. And whereas an application has been submitted to the Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions for a grant in the amount of $1,500 to implement Phase 3 of the Bradley Beach Maritime Forest. And whereas acknowledged that any additional costs associated with implementing Phase 3 of the Maritime Forest, as provided in the project budget, shall be secured by the restoration team. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Bradley Beach that they hereby express their full support for the implementation of Phase 3 of the Bradley Beach Maritime Forest, as well as the application submitted to the Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions for a grant in the amount of $1,500 to implement Phase 3. And be it further resolved that the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Bradley Beach hereby direct the Administrator, that's you, David, to forward a letter to the Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions, together with a certified copy of this resolution endorsing the application submitted to the commissions, and for a grant in the amount of $1,500 to implement Phase 3 of the Maritime Forest.
Thank you, Greg. And Al, would you like to, a little background on that with regards to the work by Jim Shishis and Captain Al?
Yes, thank you. As you mentioned, Captain Al Majeski and Jim Shishis have been actually for almost a decade now drivers of the establishment of the Maritime Forest, and they also were instrumental in the completion of Phase 2. For all the reasons that Mr. Cannon just referenced, this is a really unique creation within Bradley that serves as a bit of a model for the rest of the shore. And so I think as a community, we take great pride in what we've accomplished already. Captain Al and Jim Shishis had explored additional opportunities to secure funding to make additional enhancements in the Maritime Forest. And as a result of their efforts, all the things that Mr. Cannon just read are probably going to cost closer to $5,000 to $6,000. They have an immediate grant available of $1,500, but they have committed to the borough that they will be able to secure the additional funding needed to establish the benches and the walking paths and so forth. So I think a very exciting opportunity for the borough to complete this Phase 3 of the Maritime Forest and continue to make it not only attractive to our residents, but attractive to migrating birds and species that would use that as a natural habitat.
Okay, thank you. And Council President Weber, did you want to expand any more on item H with regards to resolution urging the state of New Jersey to hold fossil fuel companies accountable?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is a movement afoot in the state and elsewhere recognizing that there are going to be costs to climate change, either damages after the fact or mitigation preparations. It's going to cost money in a nutshell. There's really great evidence that these fossil fuel companies knew decades ago. They knew what they were doing, and they set out on a program of obfuscation and denial and just muddying the waters. So this just simply asks the governor and the attorney general by way of the governor to hold those companies accountable and have them paying for some of the damages that we're all going to incur with respect to climate change. I believe Seabright appropriately passed this first. Monmouth County, other towns are doing this, and just really happy to add our name to the list of towns calling on the state to do this.
Thank you. Would anyone like any of these items voted out separately?
Mr. Mayor, if we could vote out separately on item I and have a little discussion about that, appreciate that.
Okay, so let me make a motion to approve items A through H at this time. Is there a second?
Second.
Now, Mr. Gubatose,
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith,
Yes.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad.
Yes, and now, Mr. Weber,
Mayor.
with regards to item I?
Mayor, just real quick, if I can just say that
Okay.
Councilman Bonnell is back with us.
Oh, there he is.
Randy, you're on mute.
I didn't mean to stop the meeting. I just
Okay.
wanted everyone to recognize that he's back.
John, with regards to item I?
Terrific. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just for the benefit of the public, I was hoping we could talk about the different members of this community center task force committee. I'm not sure I have them all, but just help me out here. We're talking about yourself, the mayor, the borough administrator, the head of the DPW.
Let me step in there. So it's the mayor, the borough administrator, the tourism director, the historical society president, a designee from the Arts Council, a designee from the library, and a designee by the superintendent of public works, and two public members appointed by the mayor with the consent of the council.
if,
Mayor, again, if I just may add in here, and that's my error, the superintendent was supposed to be the superintendent of schools.
All right. Okay. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
no problem. All fine people who have my respect. If it's okay with you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make amend that simply to add 2 other people instead of just 2 residents of town that are your choice, to make that 3, and to also add a member of the Borough Council, again, of your choice. If you're open to that, I think that would be that would just round out this committee a little bit better.
Well, and that was the original conversation that Paul, myself, and the borough administrator had. Our only concern was that Councilmember Gubitosi is a member of the Board of Trustees for the separate 501c3 that's been created. So you would you create the potential of 3 council members at a meeting.
So, Mr. Weber, I'd like to add a thought or 2 here as well. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for raising that issue. One of the concerns I had is building this particular, task force membership around my anticipated role of serving on as a trustee. I was thinking, I shared this with Mr. Brown, that I thought we should, as a matter of procedure, include a council liaison role for this task force. That I could certainly hold that role as long as I'm a member of the council. But at the same time, if I were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, as the saying goes, I think it would be better planning to allow us to have a council member liaison should I either cease to be a trustee or cease to be a council member.
All right, I'm fine with that. I'll make a motion to amend the task force membership to include a council liaison and expand the public members from 2 to 3. Is that okay?
Well, I'd like to go everyone one further. I was actually planning to make a motion to expand the public members to 4. A couple of things. One, I tested this with Mr. Nishampkin, who's very anxious to engage public members who are, who are excited and anxious to participate. So he was sharing my concern of limiting the public access. I also did check with the borough attorney to find out if there really was a difference whether we had an even number or odd number on the committee. And I think, Mr. Cannon, the answer is it doesn't really make a difference. So whether we end up with an even number or odd number, I'd just like to make a motion, maybe Mr. Mayor, to build on your motion to say, include a council liaison, but also to ask us to add 4 resident members appointed by you.
Okay, so that my motion's been amended by Councilmember Gubitosi. Any other comments?
No.
The revised membership is
I
the
was just
mayor,
saying,
the borough
thank you, Mr.
administrator.
Mayor, thank you for entertaining this. I appreciate that.
Okay, so the revised membership, just so we're all on the same page. Mayor, borough administrator, council liaison, tourism director, historical society president, arts council designee, library director or their designee, school superintendent or their designee, and 4 public members appointed by the mayor with the consent of the borough council, correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Mr. Gubitosi,
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith,
Yes.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad.
Yes, and we will shoot to have a meeting in early May. And we'll get the word out to everyone as soon as possible. With regards to the resolutions, I'm assuming, David, that the first one with regards to an agreement with Avakian for construction administration on the boardwalk upgrades, that would be tabled as well, correct?
Correct, Mayor, because it references ordinance 20-3, which is not approved at this time.
Okay, so move on to the second one, which is authorizing a professional engineering services agreement with Liana Savakian for construction administration and inspection services in relation to the improvements to Newark Avenue, Phase 1, Cliff and Kent Avenue.
Second.
Mr. Bennell,
Yes.
Mr. Gubatose,
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith,
Yes.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad.
Yes. The next item memorializes action what was taking place a few days ago with regards to short-term rentals. The actual language is authorizing a resolution temporarily prohibiting all hotels, motels, guest homes, or private residence or parts thereof from accepting any new transient guest, short-term tenants, or seasonal tenants as of 8 p.m. on April 14th, 2020. Any questions with regards to this?
Mr. Mayor, if we could clarify for the public, this is open-ended correctly. We don't have an end date for this. And if you or the administrator could provide what's the guidance from the state as to when this could end?
So the state hasn't provided that guidance yet, and that would be the trigger point for us to make a motion to remove this.
I could answer the question for you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, Greg, go ahead.
So the authority under which you're able, so as you know, the governor has control over basically all the good businesses in the state of emergency. And the state, as you know, as a municipality, all your power flows from the state. So the state your power in this flows from an executive order and an administrative order from the state that allows municipalities outside the purview of the state, beyond the restrictions by the state, to regulate the types of businesses that are listed here: hotels, motels, guest houses, things of that nature, private homes that are being rented out. So your authority to have this resolution ceases when those executive orders or that administrative order is rescinded by the governor, which will happen in a future executive order. I believe I wrote that into the resolution, that it was self-terminating upon the rescission of the executive orders giving you the authority to do it. I will double check that at this moment, but I believe it's self-terminating by its terms.
And that's
Greg, if I can enter in real quick, you are correct. In the be it further resolved, it says exactly that.
And I appreciate that. I just noticed a couple other towns had put an end date, but maybe that predated the governor's executive order. So I'm fine with this, but thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, I think that's the case. So I'll make a motion to approve that resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bennell,
Yes.
Mr. Gubatose,
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith,
Yes.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad.
Yes. I'm getting the echo here. And finally, from some part of the transfers of David into his role as the borough administrator, we want to take the action of authorizing David G. Brown II, the borough administrator, to serve as the fund commissioner to the Monmouth Municipal Joint Insurance Fund. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bennell,
Yes.
Mr. Gubatose,
Yes.
Mr. Sexsmith,
Yes.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Engelstad. Mayor,
Oh, mute, Mayor.
you're on mute.
Still on mute.
Calling at me.
All right, so that was weird. Now's the time for mayor and council reports. Council President Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me first just say it is great to see everyone. To see the council regulars makes this feel like a regular council meeting. It's also great to see some people that I don't think have ever come to a council meeting in person. So it's great to see everybody. Just want to provide an explanation. I know on the last meeting, we had taken action on our first reading of the shade tree ordinance, but we took a closer look and based on some feedback from residents, we actually think we can do better. So that is our intention, to double back and see if we can do better than the shade tree ordinance we had at the last meeting. So thank you for your patience on that. I just want to speak to some things in general in town. the boardwalk closure, I am pleasantly surprised that this has been, that everybody's been respecting it. I thought this was going to be another headache and it was just going to be really hard to keep people off the boardwalk. I know the police are working hard and they can give verbal reminders from their vehicles, but that's really it. So I'm really happy that everybody's respecting that, and that's it gives me hope. Of course, the beach is still open, and it seems like we've opened some additional access points to the beach. And initially, it was just north, south, and Brinley. And I know we've added 4th Avenue, possibly another, just so, you know, there's not so much crowding at the actual entrances. So the beach is open, and hopefully we can keep it that way. And people will respect the physical distancing that we need to honor. Speaking of the beach, we have a couple of threatened birds. The oyster catchers are back. People might remember them from last year, this pair of American oyster catchers. If you see them on the beach, give them some space. They're the birds that, they look like they have a carrot for a nose, or a beak, I should say. You may want to give them some space and also some privacy, because it is mating season and that's what they're here for. So give them some room. And then one final comment, you know, the DPW came in and cleaned up the church property once we took possession of it. A lot of yard maintenance hadn't been done in a long time. They removed some, you know, weed trees and some just really overgrown shrubs, and cleaned up the property. And as a neighbor, I appreciate that. And it just gives me hope that, you know, we're moving forward. Inside of the building is next, but we've started on the outside, and it's looking really good. And I appreciate that. Again, it is great to see everybody. And that's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Sexsmith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start off talking about the Memorial Day Committee and the parade. We are still planning with the parade going forward. We're sort of on hold at this point as everybody works through COVID-19 and our response, but the plan at this point is to still hold the parade. Moving on to fire and first aid, I spoke with Chief Zeck. He was very appreciative of the PPE that was donated. He said they were also able to get some PPE from State Senator Vin Gopal's foundation, and they are answering calls. They are still working, and they're there to support us as we need them. As far as the police department, the OEM, of course, has been heavily engaged in this COVID-19 response. They've been doing quite a bit of work with the county and the state to keep flattening out the curve. Special shout out to Detective Lieutenant Terry Browning, who on his own time sewed 100 cloth masks to help outfit all the borough workers with protection during their daily interaction as essential personnel. The cost of materials was covered by Chief Guida, and as I said, Detective Browning used his off time to sew those masks. So thank you very much. Last thing I wanted to do was just dovetail with something Council President Weber said, talking about the beach. We've been starting to see quite a few seals up on the beach. The recommendation, of course, is that, you know, they're fun to see and they're nice to look at, but please give them a good solid distance. They are wild animals. Please respect them while they're sitting out there sunning them. If you're concerned that they're injured or stuck or lost or something, please give the police department a call, but do not approach animals. Thank you.
Mr. Gubatose?
Yes, building on the comments Councilman Weber made, we did introduce the Shade Tree Commission ordinance at our last meeting and decided that based on public feedback, we should revisit it and perhaps continue to add some updates to it. That links me though to the fact that that ordinance is an agenda item for the upcoming planning board meeting. And I think given the fact that we're planning to revisit that and perhaps make significant edits to it, I was wondering if there was an opportunity to communicate to the planning board. I see Mr. Shuck has actually joined us in the audience, but I'm wondering if there's an official means by which we can communicate to the planning board to not spend a lot of time in review of the initial draft ordinance.
Yeah, I'll have the Mr. Brown make that communication.
Okay, great. Otherwise, I'll keep my comments very brief, but I did want to once again call out the food pantry. Given all of the challenges that we as a community face, you know, one of the biggest challenges is got to be feeding the hungry, and the numbers are going to continue to swell. We're seeing this around the country. It's certainly going to be true here in Bradley Beach. In talking to the director of the food pantry, they are constantly on the lookout for volunteers. The hours of distribution of food are typically 10 a.m. till 12 noon, Monday through Friday, and then there's another section Thursday evening. So if there are anyone out there who might have some time and can volunteer to help, that would be great. But besides volunteering of your time, donations of food are critical, and donations of paper bags. They are in significant need. The food pantry actually has some funds built up, reserved dollars, but they're having trouble accessing food. So anything that anyone could do to provide food to the pantry, that would be a wonderful thing. And then finally, I just wanted to build on, I thought it was a great idea of Councilman Weber to recognize the wonderful contributions nurses are making across the United States as healthcare workers in this crazy time. I just wanted to add that there are so many others, and I'm not going to read them all off, actually starting with their own food pantry volunteers, but whether it be first responders and doctors and pharmacists and so on, the list just goes on. I'm amazed by grocery store cashiers, you know, working to make sure that we can come in and buy food. So I just want to make sure that we all continue to recognize all of these heroes and just appreciate the effort that we as the community are putting together to get us all through this trying time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bunnell?
I think everybody's touched on most of the things that I was going to speak about. There is one thing I'd like to say. I go on a daily bike ride up and down the beach, all the way down to Seagirt every day because I can't go to the gym anymore. And one of the things that really struck me was I had a conversation with a couple of the police officers in town here, and I don't think it's really appropriate for me to go into the details or name names, but the additional amount of work that those men and women are putting in is colossal. And it has to do with paperwork too. And I had some conversations with some of the officers in other towns, and they're seeing the same thing. And in keeping with everybody else, I just really would like to thank them for their unbound service.
Thank you. Just a couple comments just to piggyback on what Councilmember Weber said. It's really up to everyone with regards to how long we can keep the beach open. I hope we don't have to take any action. It's kind of our last oasis that we have. But if people abuse that privilege, then the action would have to be taken. But so far, so good. The governor made a great comment on his press conference that social distancing is working. And the curve, I mean, the number I gave out at the beginning, close to 3,000 people have died. That's pretty scary. And when nothing is more foreign to me than walking down the sidewalk and stepping out off the curb when someone is coming the other direction. But that's what we have to do. So I just want to thank everyone for doing the right thing, for observing the social distancing, especially at the grocery stores, things like that. Again, I'll make the plea to support the businesses that are still remaining open. That last week tied into what Councilmember Gubitosi said. Vic's Restaurant did 50% of all the revenue last Wednesday went to the food bank, and the folks were appropriately spaced all the way down to Evergreen Avenue, waiting to pick up their pizzas. So thank you, Vix, for doing that. But please, I'm very, very, very concerned about our businesses in town because this is difficult, even with carryout to remain sustainable. So do everything you can with your own budget to support them as best you can. Randy was spot on with regards to the work that our police are doing. Our borough administrator has created a program where our borough employees are working at home or coming in here on rotating days. We've taken some actions to mitigate the exposure that our public works employees would have with the general public, but the police and the first aid don't have that choice of interacting with people. So they are doing a yeoman's job above and beyond. We do have, so far at this point, we've had 15 positive cases in Bradley Beach. That's all I know. I don't know who they are. I don't know where they are. I don't know what their current situation is, but there are 15 people who have tested positive, according to the director of the Freeholder director, Arnone. So we hope we don't have to do this much longer, but I have a feeling that at least our next few meetings are going to be like this. I want to thank our borough administrator for getting us off to a great start. And I'll be quiet, and now we'll have any public comment. Again, if you can't get through, this is my cell number. I'll take your call on my speakerphone, but just go ahead and start talking, and we'll try to do it one at a time. Any public comment? Mr. Cohen.
Sure, Thomas Cohen, 612 3rd Avenue. Mayor, congratulations on the food truck rental. This is much closer to what the market should be. Last year was unfortunate, but hopefully we can be as successful with 2nd Avenue in the upcoming weeks. And congratulations on the church purchase. When we come out of this whole thing, it's going to be a wonderful thing for the community to gather and help put this back together and make a true community center. And I enjoyed Mr. Nishempkin's comments before. He's worked very hard on it. So I look forward to all of us working together. And in terms of the shade tree ordinance, I was just wondering if any revision is going to be workshopped.
We can do that. Yeah, we can do it at the meeting on the 28th. We can have a workshop if that's okay. Mr. Weber?
I'm sure, certainly we can.
Great. Thanks very much, Mayor.
Any other public comment?
Mayor, there's a Julie with her hand up.
Yeah, just go ahead and start speaking with your name and address, please.
Unmute.
Julie, you're on mute.
Julie Nutitis, 605 North Avenue.
Julie, a little closer, please. We can't hear you.
How about now? Can you hear me?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay. This is something that I came across, and Mr. Mayor, I know when you and I met with Tim, our council member, Tim Sexsmith, and I know we brought Randy up to speed about some of the initiatives we'd like to see with quality of life. I was doing some research because I have some free time on my hand right now. And I don't know if anybody's aware of, but, you know, we have the Coastal Habitat City Humanity, Habitat for Humanity in Asbury Park. And I know that you had asked, is there any way that we can come up with some ideas to help people who are less fortunate, you know, with property maintenance, if they're senior citizens or people who are low income? And there's a program going on in Asbury Park that they partnered with the Coastal Habitat Humanity organization in AP, and they actually wound up getting a community development block grant, so that they will partner along with Habitat of Humanity. And also, if people meet certain criteria, then they're able to get funding. There's like volunteers. I know, Mr. Mayor, you would like us to have more volunteers to get involved. And I was just wondering if anybody was aware of that, because I know you've asked that for a couple of years now, and I think that maybe we have found something. And I don't know if anybody was aware of this. And Tim, I know I shared this with you.
I'm actually, one of my side jobs is working with the Asbury Park Rotary, and I was working on their house that they're currently building in Asbury. I was painting the basement ceiling, so I'm very familiar with what they're doing. But fantastic organization, but I don't know if they have a presence or have a needed presence in Bradley Beach.
Well, the whole thing is whether or not we can apply for, partner with them. I mean, obviously you can't have a Habitat of Humanity in every single city, but maybe it's something that Bradley Beach might want to partner with them. And Mr. Brown, I don't know if you're aware of any kind of grants that we can possibly look into to help the less fortunate in town who, are property owners or senior citizens on fixed incomes. Because Gary, I think that's, I remember that's what you were asking us to kind of look into with one of our initiatives.
Yeah, I can, through my little endeavor, I've gotten to know the leadership there. I can certainly reach out to them and see that they're always looking for other opportunities, and their work is not just Asbury, it's all over Monmouth County. So let me find out what I can, and I'll get back to you. Is that okay?
Perfect. All right, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other public comment? Go ahead. Okay. Last call. Okay, everyone, please be safe. Keep the social distancing. Look out for your neighbors. And thank you very much. And we'll reach out to you if we have to with reverse 911 if there's something that we need to update you. Keep watching Governor Murphy's press conferences on News Channel 12 every day. They're very informative. They're very helpful. My heart goes out to him. He's just coming off of cancer surgery and went right into this episode. So he's doing an incredible job as far as I'm concerned. So thank you all. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Right?
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, right. I make a motion to adjourn, Erica.
Second.
Say second.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
I think
All in
Tim
favor?
seconded it. Aye.
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 Okay, great.
Thanks, Erica.
Okay, great.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
You're welcome.
Good night.